Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine war breaking news update concerning the counteroffensive that may be taking place in the Zaporizhzhia region of Ukraine. This is going to be a bit of a, not quite a mapping update so much as talking about certainly some rumors that are finding their way through to the socials at the moment. There is a lot of operational security in the area, OPSEC, which means that there is very little data, robust, confirmable data coming out from the area. But there is one mapper who is mapping the area, might well have some contacts in the region, is mapping the area in some detail. Take everything I say, therefore, with a pinch of salt, because it's kind of relying on one particular source. Look, before we get into it, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Keep yourselves on top of what's going on in the war in Ukraine and beyond, geopolitically speaking. Let's get to what could be some good news for the Ukrainians, and goodness knows they need it. Okay, so here is the map of Ukraine. This is Andrew Perpetua's map. We're going to look at this area on the southern front line, this bulge where the Ukrainians have been put under heaps of pressure over quite a long period of time now, where the Russians have just been moving through from the east, taking over places like Velika Novosilka, all the way back to Vuhledar and so on and so forth. And now we have, goodness me, all these places like Novomykhailivka and so on and so forth. But now we have activity along this area, and also actually beneath, south of Zaporizhzhia, in a place called Stepnahirsk, and around there on the edge of the reservoir. There appears to be a number of places. There appear to be a number of places where the Ukrainians are counterattacking. Whether this constitutes a counteroffensive, I guess we'll find out sooner or later. Claims that, obviously Kupiansk they've retaken, but claims that they might be pushing further there as well. Borova up here to Liman, Ukrainians might be pushing as well. They are. There is definitely positive. There are positive signs for Ukrainians there. They're struggling somewhat in Pokrovs'ke itself, or at least, it is very difficult. They're holding the Russians back there, but they are the Russians are slowly taking land in Pokrovs'ke and Myrnihad. But this is the area we're talking about, the Huliapole direction, where I think there's a concerted effort to essentially protect Dnipro and Zaporizhzhia down here, this major Ukrainian city that has been threatened from the south, but also might be threatened from the east. So that's what we're going to look at. I'm actually not going to return too much to this map. I'm going to rely on a mapping of AMK Mapping. AMK Mapping, just to give you a sense of who they are, is I think a New Zealand source that at the beginning of the war was very much pro-Ukraine, then seemed to have gone the direction of Willie OAM, and been almost potentially, you get the sense they're almost happy when there are these strikes on Ukrainian stuff. But more recently, I think they've been fairly accurate in their claims, showing things from both sides. Interesting source to follow if you want to follow someone concerning mapping and stuff that gets blown up on the socials in this war. So anyway, that's AMK Mapping. They are pretty much the only mapper talking in this kind of detail of the area. One of the things I said earlier today was a lot of rumors about the Ukrainian counteroffensive in the Pokrovs'ke and Hulyaipole directions has been confirmed. And these would be rumors concerning what the Ukrainians are achieving, the kind of those successful things. And also we can talk about Starlink and Telegram playing a really significant part. Continues, the situation looks very bad for the Russians here. The Ukrainians were able to break through the main forward Russian fortifications and are now pushing even deeper. Okay, those are just a couple of not quite throwaway comments, but just comments on the socials about what Ukraine is achieving, comments from about 5 hours ago. Bear in mind, as I say, that you're not getting a lot of information out from here. So pinch of salt and all that. But if AMK Mapping says some things that are very positive for Ukraine, I generally will take that on board, more so because I think he's been skewing more to the Russian side. So if he says that the Ukrainians are having success and he's backing it up consistently, then he's probably onto something. I think he was right about, say, Kupiansk recently, and other places where things have happened to the benefit of the Ukrainians. Okay, so there is that. There could have been breakthroughs. There was talk the other day that there were possibly 16-kilometer breakthroughs, or a breakthrough of 16 kilometers just in one fell swoop from the Ukrainian point of view, which is obviously very useful for the Ukrainians. Now, there's a lot going on in this general area. You have all the way up here, you have the Volcha River, which this is the Volcha River. It comes and it does all sorts. I need to find out where it goes because it might come back down here. I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, you'll see on AMK Mapping's map this basically. If I show you, yeah, here we go. So here you've got the Volcha River all the way up here. You've got it very close to the Ukrainian lines there. Just trying to work out, where that seems to be. Anyway, this is MK Mapping's map of the area and the various attacks that are coming down. You've got a number of different rivers here that are going to be important defensive positions or objectives for the Ukrainians to get over, so they don't, that it doesn't remain an obstacle for them to quickly get over these rivers and move into the Russian territories. And there could be this chance to cut Russians off in this northern part of the area here. Just to give you a sense of where some of these places are, you've got Northward Zaporizhzhia. We're hearing today that that's been recaptured. You've got Kovitseve there, or Kovitseve there, that's been recaptured. Tonavati here. And then we're going to come up to Alexandrivka and Orikhiv there. That's Orikhiv that apparently has been retaken. I say I'm not going to return to the map, Andrew Perpetua's map, but here we have you've got, well, coming down to where we were, you've got Nova Zaporizhzhia here. These are places that have been retaken by the Ukrainians. They're pushing down in this direction, and you got Orikhiv and Nova Alexandrivka there. So it doesn't go as far up as here. We're talking about this part of the bulge there. Okay, so AMK Mapping gave us this update from this area back we're talking 3.5 hours ago. So this is fairly recent and quite detailed. Situational update on the Ukrainian counteroffensive. So calling it counteroffensive now, Huliapole in Pokrovs'ke direction on the 12th of February. Doesn't really go out to Pokrovs'k, to be honest. On February the 5th, coinciding with the disconnection of Russian Starlink terminals and heavy shelling of Russian positions. And I would also say the loss of Telegram. I think these are playing a part. So Moscow Times had an article the other day saying that the Russians retreated in the Zaporizhzhia direction because of their loss of Starlink. So you could argue that what Elon Musk did to help the Ukrainians out was done at this particular time for an operational reason. It wasn't just, oh, I saw this train getting blown up and felt sorry for the Ukrainians, so I don't want Starlink to be used to allow drones to strike these civilian trains. I think there was some joining up of dots in terms of what happened with regard to Starlink, and I think it's been a really significant element to this counteroffensive, or it's just amazing luck for the Ukrainians. But there you go. So Ukraine launched a series of coordinated counterattacks and clearing operations, which are now bloomed into a localized counteroffensive operation. So there are some claims that what the Ukrainians are doing really isn't like a massive counteroffensive, that these are just glorified clearing operations because there aren't too many Russians in these areas. Like I've said to you before, the Ukrainians weren't heavily defending anywhere along the front line. They were defending in areas with a lot of drone coverage, these drone corridors, the drone line, 15 to 20 kilometers, to try and stop any movement in that corridor. They use these FPV drones and bomber drones and Baba Yagas to just essentially patrol and eliminate any movement. But if you punch through that, then there isn't really a depth of defense for the Ukrainians. There are some fortifications, but with fortifications, you need to man them. And the same could be said for the Russians. So as they push forward and take all this, quite a large area of land that they did relatively quickly, because there wasn't much Ukrainian defense, they ended up not manning these vast areas with huge numbers of troops and not having to, once they get past the defenses, not having to then dig defenses particularly. They're just kind of moving on and on. And it could be that they've kind of exhausted themselves. They are, they've culminated. They've got really low morale. They're struggling to recruit as much as they would like. They're taking huge losses. And at this time, Ukraine could have been accumulating troops, getting ready for a counteroffensive, and then waiting for the right moment. Starlink goes down, Telegram goes down, and then you push back, and actually it's relatively easy to take back the land, at least some of the land that you've lost. So is it glorified clearing operations? Could look like that, because actually the Russians don't really have consolidated control of many of these areas, but that's a lot of my speculation there. Anyway, the current main tactical goal of the operation appears to be to cut off the Russian salient along the Yanchur River from the Zlahoda-Verbova line to the Pischane-Andriivka line, highlighted in red on the map. So that's this area here. As such, the attack is taking place in two main directions. The first and largest direction is from the north. During January and February, Ukrainian forces accumulated significant infantry in multiple bridgeheads south of the Volcha River, which they were able to retain during Russia's autumn-winter offensive in this direction, and use these to launch a coordinated series of clearing operations against lightly manned and lightly consolidated, that's what I was saying, Russian positions. They were able to relatively quickly seize large portions of these positions, including the villages of Oleksivka, Sosnivka, and Vovcha, and subsequently began moving further south to the main Russian fortifications, which lie approximately along the former Ukrainian defensive line. So you've got Oleksivka up there, and then arguably the Ukrainians have got all the way down here. So here, if we come into back to where we were, we have Oleksivka up there, and it could be that the Ukrainians got all the way sort of down here and are looking to cut off this section of the Russian forces. Okay, so where were we? Autumn, winter. Okay. Yes, so we're on to this next part. So since then, Ukrainian forces have penetrated this line at multiple points. The deepest penetration took place west of the village of Stepova, which was also recaptured, where they took several strong points and subsequently crossed a tributary of the Yanchur River. So this is the Yanchur River here. There's a tributary, the Yanchur River, coming up here. Propelling south towards a border between Zaporizhzhia and Donetsk Oblast, Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Here they were able to recapture several tree lines and strong points and began pushing east and west in an attempt to broaden their bridgehead. In the east, the Ukrainians broke into the village of Kalnivska and managed to entrench in the western houses. Fighting is ongoing for the rest of the settlement. Ukrainian DRGs are already able, who have already been operating here in the days leading up to this penetration. In the west, they began pushing southwest through the tree lines in the direction of the eastern bank of the Yanchur River. Okay, so to put this in context, let's have a look at some of these places. So there's a marked difference between AMK's mapping here and Andrew Perpetua. Andrew Perpetua has a lot of this in the grey zone. So a lot of the activity you're seeing is around this area. You've got Solodka down here. So this is Solodka. I'm on AMK Mapping's map. Solodka is there. You got all this stuff to the north and northwest, as well as a lot to the west directly. Well, Solodka's on the corner there. So, you know, a lot of this area, where the grey zone that Andrew has in yellow, and AMK Mapping says that is Russian controlled. So it's worth taking that into account. Anyway, meanwhile, on the left bank of the deep penetration, Ukrainian assault groups managed to break through from the newly captured village of Sosnivka to the Berezova turnover line, entering and capturing the northern part of the latter and reaching the northeastern outskirts of the former. On the right flank, they continued clearing tree line positions in the direction of Nova Alexandriivka. Okay, so essentially, there's a lot of detail here coming from AMK Mapping, which makes you wonder where he's getting all this information from. One presumes in order to, I mean, unless he's just pulling it entirely out of his backside, he must have contacts that he is getting this information from, because there's a lot of detail about a number of these places in the region of Saloka. We're talking about Dobropilya, Nova Zaporizhzhia, so on and so forth. Okay, and just to remind you that Huliapole itself, as the larger town in the area, is just there. Okay, should I second general direction of the of the counteroffensive is taking place from the east here? The Ukrainians cannot boast of as many gains, mainly due to the fact that the Russians concentrated a significantly larger amount of forces here for the offensive west of Huliapole, and are therefore much more dug in at forward positions after recapturing Ternivati and Precarious, which occurred prior to the beginning of the counteroffensive. Ukrainian forces recaptured the neighboring village of Kozhitsev, and the Russians were unable to hold that they were unable to hold due to the loss of Ternivati. Ukrainian forces also recaptured positions in the northwest of Pokrovs'ke after their initial raid into the northern part of the village failed. Okay, so this is the area. If we have here Pokrovs'ke, Dobropilya, Kozhitsev. So this area, as you can see, the yellow arrows there, is more difficult for the Ukrainians, because the Russians really piled a lot of effort and troops into taking Huliapole, and so they have much more robust control of this. So the weakness does seem to be up here in the north. Now, you're not seeing any of this on Andrew's map, of course, because there is a lot of OPSEC, but it seems to have been something that AMK Mapping has been able to access. I've marked in yellow, he says on the map, where Ukraine is currently heavily shelling Russian positions and fortifications. All of the attacks to the north are taking place under extremely heavy cover from artillery, MLRS, and drones. So a lot of combined warfare going on there. The Ukrainian pincers are beginning to turn inwards towards the gut of the Russian salient. However, the flanks of these penetrations have not been fully secured. Notably, several Russian strongpoints remain northwest and northeast of Zaporizhzhia, which are yet to be cleared and are still being shelled. Additionally, Zaporizhzhia is still under full Russian control as of February 11th, while Ternova is contested. Ukrainian forces are also yet to eliminate the Russian bridgehead over the Huliapole River west of Dobropilya, and have also not taken the important strong points east of Dobropilya to protect the push to the northeast towards the Yehorivka-Zhlahoda line. Okay, which is, goodness me, all to say that pushing further to, there's Zhlahoda, pushing further to the east here is somewhat difficult. They cleared out Ternivati over here, but there are certain places that's still under Russian control. I just try and put one or two of them on the map for you. So we come back up to here, Ternova. This area, Ternova's contested. Berezova is still under control of the Russians. So that looks like broadly where that northern area is being contested. Anyway, there you get it. A whole bunch of detail about what is going on here. I think this is in actually, he might go on to say it here. Notably, it's taking place in the coordination with much smaller clearing operations in western Zaporizhzhia Oblast, and in short, appears to be part of a larger coordinated effort aimed at eliminating the threat of encirclement for the city of Orikhiv in the near future, which has slowly seen Russian flanks building from the east in the area of Huliapole. So, in other words, this is to protect Orikhiv, which is an area that the Ukrainians have, or the Russians have, long had a view of taking, because, well, if you look at all of this, I mean, goodness me, this used to be so much longer, go all the way back here, but they've been closing in and in from the east, and I think it goes further than, say, protecting those areas much closer to the front here, but actually ultimately protecting Zaporizhzhia up here, and movements towards Dnipro as well. So yeah, there you go. I think yes, you can protect places like Orikhiv and this whole front here, but ultimately it's the big cities you want to keep them away from. So this is a pretty sizable counteroffensive compared to what we've seen previously from Ukraine. So this has been now documented by AMK for a few days. Remember, the other day said 44.23 square kilometers have been taken back in favor of Ukraine, and this was, right at the beginning of the counteroffensive. That was one of the most advantageous. That's one of the biggest gains for Ukraine that I've seen for an awful long time. So fantastic for them to get that achievement. And then we're hearing, so this is his latest mapping. It looks like this. Here's a cleaner map showing approximately the areas Ukraine has managed to recapture in the area since the beginning of February. It amounts to approximately 111 square kilometers. 111 square kilometers, pretty significant there. So, you've got this cut into the east beneath this salient, and then you're coming down from the north. This is a weaker area. The Russians have been, stocking up troops in the Huliapole area and on this part of the front, and so this is more heavily fortified. The weakness appears to be coming from the north, and they could come down and cut some Russian forces off in this sector. And I don't know whether they would have the ability to keep going. It depends what the Russians then throw into stopping the Ukrainians in this area. In a nutshell, he says this recent counteroffensive operation is an attempt at countering Russian plans for Zaporizhzhia, as I said. And so, it's part of a larger operational strategy to make sure that these, I think, cities remain safe, but also that the Russians don't just continue taking land, because every square kilometer of land the Russians take, of course, the Ukrainians have to get it back either militarily or diplomatically. So everything comes with a cost. So that said, you don't want to just defend willy-nilly, irrespective of the costs. So you've got to know when to pull out. At the end of the day, every square kilometer needs to bleed the Russians for as much as possible. But there is a time where you make the calculations like, yeah, we're not bleeding them enough and we're bleeding too much by remaining here, so we'll pull back. But at the moment, the Ukrainians are taking the fight to the Russians, that they've got the wind behind themselves, have gained the initiative here. And of course, initiative is really important in war, because it means that the other side is having to react to you. You have control of the situation, that they don't get a chance to do what they want to do because they are having to react to what you want to do. And that's what Ukraine has been doing so consistently since they attacked into Kursk and took the initiative to the Russians there. But ever since then, they've been on the back foot, defending, but I guess stockpiling their resources, but consolidating their reserves, and then waiting for the right moment to attack, and maybe choosing that moment to coincide with the loss of Starlink and Telegram, and indeed a whole bunch of other social media platforms as well. And here we have the area in Stepnohirsk that is just by the Zaporizhzhia reservoir, that the Ukrainians are also pushing back here. AMK, again, this is coming from today, says it's also important to note the successful clearing operations being carried out in western Zaporizhzhia in order to maintain the presence south of the Konka River and keep the Russians from forming a solid left flank to Orikhiv. During these attacks, the Ukrainians have recaptured approximately 38.2 square kilometers of no man's land grey zone, lightly manned Russian-controlled territory, and solid Russian-controlled territory as well. To carry out these operations, Ukraine deployed the 253rd Assault Battalion, Array, a unit comprised entirely of volunteers from the 129th Territorial Defence Brigade from the Dobropilya direction. Other units have also likely been redeployed here to take part in these operations. So that's coming together. And then you start looking elsewhere. So the last 2 nights, we have had the Ukrainians using medium range near rear drones, FP2 and similar drones, to strike at particularly important targets. I don't know whether they've been striking anything to do with the activities in the Zaporizhzhia direction. They could be helping with those kind of drone strikes to hammer the Russian logistics and equipment there. But they've certainly been using long distance drones after a very quiet month of February and a pretty quiet January as well. They have attacked both oil refineries and military industrial complex facilities, and last night an ammunition depot, a major ammunition depot. And I think it's pretty interesting that the CEO Stillerman of Firepoint, the company that makes the FP5 Flamingo missiles, straight away released video footage of 6 missiles being sent at night. Usually you have to wait a few days for stuff like this to come out, but I think there's this sense of regaining the narrative and saying, championing their successes. And if this is a case of Flamingo having success, then that's really good news for Ukraine, because these are fairly cheap missiles that they are building themselves, but we haven't seen them too much. If we're going to start seeing more of this kind of footage, then that's only good news for Ukraine. This is the moment of the launch of 6 FP5 Flamingo missiles at night to hit the strategic ammunition storage base in Kotlubyan, approximately 400 kilometers from the border of Ukraine. So these bad boys have gone a fair distance to then hit that ammunition depot, apparently successfully. So really good news that Stillerman is showing these missiles being launched. This is a kind of like, yes, we're going to regain momentum, we're going to regain the narrative. And what we're seeing here in Huliapole could be evidence of a breakthrough. It could be evidence of, well, we haven't really seen the evidence yet, but it could be that there is a breakthrough, and that the Russians might be in a bit of trouble here because of the chaos from not having decent communications, and the Ukrainians taking full advantage of that and striking deep into the Russian-controlled areas, possibly even, as mentioned, 16 kilometers. The claim from AMK is that they've now regained 111 square kilometers since the beginning of this. So that's absolutely incredible. Really good news for the Ukrainians. Good luck to them, and I'll try and get as much information as I can, but very few sources are reporting on this because it is so tightly monitored in terms of OPSEC. But yeah, fingers crossed for the Ukrainians. Take care. I'll speak to you soon.